I'm really excited that I get to talk with you today. So kind of tell us like how you found out about Lash and Brow and like that whole kind of step before, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Obviously there are a number of permanent makeup artists around town, but as I was kind of like looking through everybody in their portfolios, I really wanted to find somebody that had more natural looking work, and I wanted someone that had like a lengthier or a deeper portfolio. So it's not somebody who's just has like a couple of pictures up online. And so I felt really really good about Lash and Brow. And again, I really like the naturalness of kind of like your aesthetic. And so I felt really comfortable after calling and talking to the person on the phone and coming in and talking to you. And so I was very happy with my experience here, very happy with my results, obviously.
Yeah. So and remind me, when did we do this? This was back in what year?
So this was back, I think it's like a year and a half ago
Okay.
was when I had come in. Yeah.
Yeah. So and then we got to touch base. The girl said, hey, we have Alexis Reed for you to call back. And so I'm going through the calls, and you and I are in the midst of conversation about getting a touch up and everything else. And I had asked, which is a really common question for us to ask, like, hey, like, what medications are you on? And you said, I'm going to start radiation. And I was
Yes.
like, whoa, okay, hold, pause. Wait, what just happened? So I saw you for brows, and then kind of give me like what occurred. I mean, because this wasn't known when I did your appointment.
Yes. Well, so I came for my initial application a year and a half ago. And I was looking forward to to getting a touch up, just kind of as that continual maintenance. But in the meantime, yes, I did unfortunately have a breast cancer diagnosis last summer. And so I went through my like initial course of intense chemotherapy, and I already had my surgery completed. And so I was sort of wondering, okay, when is it time to, do my touch up? Because, and I think we'll touch on this later, but having the permanent makeup was, very, very helpful actually through my cancer process. And so when we spoke, you informed me that we actually have to consider the impact of not just chemo, but also radiation and then the immunotherapy that I'm currently on. And so, I think based on that, I'm just starting my radiation and I'm in the midst of the immunotherapy. So sounds like I'm going to have to wait a little longer.
Yeah. So I want to kind of like circle back to that. So when I saw you, if you don't mind sharing, like what did that look like stepping into? Did you find it? Was this like was the doctors found it? Like how did that kind of like happen? And then what is like the process? I just can't imagine because I feel like we're really close in age, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm 30. I'll be 39 this summer.
Okay, I'm 41.
Yeah.
I was 40. Yeah, when I.
So kind of, and I think we're both the same boat. We're both single moms.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, can you share like what that was like? I can't imagine because I've not walked that road.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy because I had just been separated for a while, fairly short amount of time, and so just sort of kind of like finding myself again and getting my identity and sort of looking forward to like a new lease on life.
Yeah.
And then I had noticed a small lump in my chest, but it actually it actually expanded so quickly that I did not think it was cancer. I thought it was just some sort of inflammation. And with COVID, I think a lot of us sort of like put kind of a lot of the wellness maintenance stuff on the back burner just because going to the hospital did not seem like, the place where you wanted to be.
Yeah.
Because that's where all the sick people were. And my GP, she was really only seeing people virtually, and And she actually rescheduled me a few times. And so it actually delayed me bringing up the issue to her.
Mm.
And because I didn't think that I thought it was going to be a false alarm. And so on my side, I didn't have the urgency to push her. And so it wasn't until I think June that I saw her in person, and she saw it and, kind of quickly got the whole process started. And I was formally diagnosed in August. Or no, I'm sorry. I was formally diagnosed in July, and I started my treatment in August. And it was a whirlwind of emotions, of sort of trying to, just intellectually understand what was going on and trying to understand how it was going to impact life. Because as you mentioned, I'm a single mom. And so how was that going to impact my kids? They have very busy schedules. And so there was just a lot to sort of wrap your mind around. Yeah.
I just can't imagine because I agree with you. It's like you feel like you almost kind of get this second chance, and you're stepping into this new swing of things, and then you kind of get hit with this. So when you got diagnosed, what was a lot of times I think some people know that maybe they don't, but we work with a lot of cancer patients, and there's a lot of times where we will have clients who were like, I got diagnosed on Friday, I'm getting my report, Monday, and Tuesday starts. It's like bam, bam, bam. So what was your kind of timeline with that?
Oh, it was very much like that because I think rightfully so, the doctors don't really want to delay. Through the diagnostic process, you spend about a month or so just waiting around, between the scheduling of the appointments and the waiting of the results. And so by the time it's treatment time, they're just ready to go. And you hardly have any time to kind of even understand what's happening to you. You're sort of just, shell shocked, and they're just kind of leading you through the paces.
Yeah. So I always tell people, I wish I could go back and tell myself 2 years ago, right? Hey, you're getting ready to walk into divorce, right? Single mom. What's it like for kids? And I'm like, if I could go back and tell myself, there's some different things I think I would have done to almost prep myself for it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't ever talk about this, where it's almost hey, what are some ways to set yourself up for success? So, right, you move into the space of, you find a lump, you go to the doctor, right? What are some things, if you could go back and tell yourself again, hey, whether it's, for me, I'm I wish I had gotten HelloFresh a long time ago, or things like that.
Yeah.
Because I swear to you, I think we ate more pizza in this first 2 years of my divorce than I think I've ever eaten in my whole life, kind of thing, because you're just trying to navigate picking up kids in these different spaces. So if you were to go back and tell yourself again, or to tell other women and or just moms, right? What would you say? Okay, this is what your timeline's gonna kind of be. Here's some things that if I could tell myself to do differently.
Yeah. That's a great one, actually. The frozen meals is such a great hack. Costco, just get yourself, those
prepared meals,
calendar pot pies, and my kids, they love it. And you just keep it, your garage freezer, and you just pop one in when you're so tired. There were days where I'll just crawl out of bed and drag one of those out of the freezer, and the kids are so happy. They love that kind of stuff. The fried rice packs that they have there, and all of those. And I think it's, we as women, moms, we tend to not put ourselves first. And that's really, I think, something that for me I'm even still trying to figure out how to do that now. And I'm sure a lot of other women struggle with it. That self-care is really kind of yes, you're going to be a natural. You're going to figure out how to make sure your kids still get to where they need to go. You can tap into other moms or whatever. If you have a job, you're going to figure out a plan with your employer. But it's that self-care piece that I think we really tend to minimize, and I think it can make a whole lot of difference in how you emotionally feel as you go through this experience.
So in the midst of those whirlwinds and your whole world just spins, right? Just like that, all of a sudden it was a shift. what were things like you could say to somebody? Because I think a lot of times people think self-care, you know, as much as, and this part of like why I'm doing this podcast and stuff, like, yes, I have a business, yes, we're in the beauty industry, but I very much believe in like these conversations aren't happening. And so these are things like I want to continue to have with people to put out there to help other women. So it's interesting, you're right, owning a beauty business. I tell people, like, we love having women come in where they get to turn off their phones and there's not a tiny human knocking on the door while they're going to the bathroom, right? And they get to lay down and close their eyes for an hour. But I also think a lot of times people miss like self-care. I tell people, like, for me, is like, I know I'm taking my vitamins, I know I'm drinking my water, I know I'm drinking. So what were some things that you feel like were really practical and helpful as you're getting ready to walk into having chemo? Like, that you'd be like, these are going to be some self-care things, whether it's a bath or whether it's, I don't know, like, what were things that you'd be like, hey, these are some things you might not have thought of yet that you just, like you said, the days of like you're crawling out of bed. What were some self-care things that were helpful for you?
I think those moments where you're like just still, like you said, is really, really helpful. If, you know, we're all different. You know, for some women, you know, they're in their zone actually when they're cooking, but, you know, maybe you're in your zone when you're taking a bath. And like, actually for me, I find that, you know, those like spa appointments, like when you're getting a massage, or, I mean, this sounds a little sad, but even when I'm in my like physical therapy, occupational therapy sessions, you know, those are times where I'm sort of forced to be still and focus on myself, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? As women, we're so good at doing what we're supposed to do. And when you're, you know, when you're like getting your hair done, or when you're, you know, getting a massage, you're supposed to be still. You're supposed to focus on yourself. And that's when we do it. And so it may seem indulgent, but, you know, a lot of that quality me time that I found where I could really just focus on myself was like the times where, you know, you carve out a time, you go somewhere, and it's a thing where it's an activity where you're supposed to focus on yourself. Yeah.
That's interesting. So when you walk into chemo, I think everybody knows, like, oh, okay, you're going to lose your hair. But I think what a lot of people don't prep you for is, oh, you're going to you could, right, lose your brows. You could lose your lashes. You're just going to look, right? Because, and that's part of why we walk through with permanent makeup, is we can't do anything to the skin because it does radically change that texture of your skin. And I think a lot of people don't, I think, prepare you for that, right? Because all of a sudden you get that initial shock of, oh, I've got cancer. So that's like a big thing, I think, one, for women to lose their hair, but then you don't think about these other pieces that give us so much definition and color. So yeah, kind of walk us through that, like what that was like.
Yeah, I think for a lot of women, you know, they've never been hairless, you know, completely, and it's quite a shock, like intellectually knowing it and having it actually happen to you and looking at yourself in the mirror is very different. You know, you can, you know, I think, you know, our society is, you know, does their best to be supportive of us and, you know, make, you know, cancer patients feel emotionally prepared to go into it. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, fun things you can do, like dyeing your hair or having a, you know, hair cutting party or that sort of thing. But I think ultimately, though, it is still, you know, a very like traumatic experience for a lot of women. And yet I mean, I personally wasn't. I think a lot of other women, you don't think about your facial hair. You know, you don't think about your eyelashes. You don't think about your eyebrows, because so much is focused on the, you know, the head or I don't know, this piece of it. And yeah, it's really jarring. It's like when you look in the mirror, it's like a totally different person, because you just proportionally look very different when you don't have those, you know, accents. And it's already a very emotionally sensitive time. You're already questioning so many things about your femininity, about your about who you are as a person, about your about your existence, right? About your ability to, continue to live. And so when you look in the mirror and you see a completely different person too, that is, that definitely, adds a lot to the like emotional trauma of it all.
Yeah, I know it's interesting when we were having this conversation. I was like, because you'd obviously gotten your eyebrows and liner, right? Done,
Yes.
yeah. Before you found out you had cancer. And so it's really, I think, a big thing that we just kind of tell people is I've never been that person who pushes things on people, and we don't, we still are in the midst of trying to, I think more so just educate people because I want people to have the knowledge and then go from there. But that's something that I tell people is, the eyebrows is one, but it's interesting when I've had the opportunity to do cancer patients before they stepped into chemo. And I'm like, let's give you as much color as we can. So I'm like, hey, like your lips, your eyeliner, your eyebrows. It's something that it sounds like it's going to be really small, but you were kind of like sharing that with me.
Yeah.
What was that like when, you knew you were losing those pieces, but just kind of like share. I think that was so interesting. I was like,
yeah.
People should know.
I mean, it's maybe it's silly of me, but even having had the permanent makeup application, I did not even put two and two together until I started to, the eyebrows and the eyelashes went a little bit slower than the top of the head hair. But once I started losing it, that's when I put two and two together. And I realized, oh, like I wasn't even noticing losing it because I had the permanent makeup application. And once I realized I was losing that hair, I was so grateful that I had the permanent makeup because it really, really minimized the change in facial features. And because I already lost the top of the head hair and was struggling a bit with that, not having to deal with it, because you would lose your eyebrows, you would lose the complete definition of your eyes, and you're already the chemo does so much, like you said, to change the texture of your skin. It completely obliterates your collagen. You're not getting that like rejuvenation of new skin cells, and so
I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
You immediately age like I would say 10 years once the chemo fully hits you, because your skin just like the laxity is gone. It just drops. And so you're already, again, as women, for better or worse, we sort of really try to maintain our, youthful glow and all of that. And I think that we know, when you lose the sharpness, when you lose the definition of the eyes, when you lose the definition of the brow bone, that also ages you. And so it just, for women who don't have permanent makeup, I think it must be even, more challenging. But like, because I struggled a lot with my skin changes. And so luckily I still had, again, the definition of the eyes, the definition of the brows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was that like for you when, even down to like the skin changes, I think through this, like, did you have to shift your skincare regimen? Did you have to like, is that how much like it radically changes with that?
Yeah, I mean, I really clung on hard. I really, really try to salvage. But then at some point you just, I don't know, for me, it was hard. Like you kind of just had to give up at some point, and you just, you do the basic stuff that you've always done, moisturizer and all of that. But your skin also gets sensitive, luckily for me, I only had skin rash for a few of my cycles, but some women get horrible skin rash, and so they can't be doing, the peels, the acid, whatever, you really can't do any of that because you're doing the best you can to just even have your skin stay normal. And so really just like a simple, basic, plain moisturizer is usually all your skin can handle. And so that's another reason why, if you had permanent makeup, it's just one less thing to worry about in terms of like how am I going to keep that makeup on? Am I going to have to put on concealer? Am I going to have to put on a primer? And, like, is this the right kind of makeup for how my skin's going to feel that particular day? Because it really does change like day to day, week to week as well, like based on what your chemo cycle is.
So was there like a specific moisturizer that you found, like you said, like kind of blocking the rashes, things like that you were like, this one seemed to work really well for me? Like,
so there's like a brand called First Aid Beauty.
Okay.
That I really, really like. They have some like really healing moisturizers that are very sensitive. But I know that there's another brand that escapes my mind right now. It's a brand that you would get at your dermatologist. That, and I'm sure like any dermatologist has a go-to brand that they would have. But it's also very, very mild. But basically, you just want to go as mild as possible to not irritate that skin any further, because the skin rash can get crazy. Yeah.
So walking into this, like for people to know, like, okay, like, because I even think like as a friend, right? I'm somebody who loves to like give gifts and like loves to kind of sometimes do, like thoughtful gifts. So if I like had a girlfriend, literally one of my favorite, I think, gifts was ever given to me was I had a girlfriend, this is back when I was doing bodybuilding, and she like had like read all the things for a show, and she took a suitcase because you can't carry it on your arm because like it messes up your spray tan, like all these different things. So if I was to be a friend who's like, I know you're going to walk into chemo treatments, it would be like, okay, finding a really great moisturizer. So you're saying like maybe this like First Aid one, getting you maybe like a few weeks of frozen meals, like having some friends just have stuff that's easy for you to throw into the fridge. What would be some other things? I mean, that you feel like would be like, oh, this is really helpful if you have a girlfriend ready to walk into it. Because I feel like it's one thing when people are like, I'm really sorry that you're going through this. But it's another thing when people actually like tangibly, physically show up.
Yes.
And are like, you just feel different in that support space. Or they're like, are you like, oh, this is really comfy jammies to wear when you're going to chemo? Or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are some things you're just like, this is great?
Yeah. I mean, for people who are going through chemo, and we already talked about how whirlwind of an experience it is, sometimes it's hard for them to articulate what they need from you. Because I have great friends with great intention, say like, anything you need, just ask. Anything you need, just ask.
But it's hard for us to ask as women in general, right?
Yes, exactly. It's so hard to ask for help in the first place. And then to know what you need, it's such a strange experience. Like that's really hard for us to identify, I think. But yes, like you named a couple of really great things. Another one is like a solid like moisturizer. So I think like L'Occitane has a really good one. Again, the brain fog is making me, on the rest of your body gets really, really dry. And so especially my hands were just like cracking at one point. And so those, like, I don't know if you've ever seen those, like, there's Gardener's moisturizers that are for like gardener's hands.
Okay.
But like those heavy salves are really great.
Okay.
Another one is like, this is like a little cheat of mine, but your skin gets really dry on your body and it starts to develop that crepey look. So Gold Bond, they have a crepe corrector lotion.
Okay.
That's really, really great for your body. And it is like, it works immediately. Like on the bottle, it says it changes it in a day. It really does. Like I put it on and it smoothes out my skin. And again, like just when you're dealing with all of these like changes to your femininity, it's like, it's really nice to feel like you still have nice skin. And a lot of people deal with neuropathy. And so whether it's like summer or winter, you can, if there's like now they sell these like booties that you can wear, like you microwave them. Okay. And it's warm and you put them on your feet.
Dude, I need that.
And yes, they have them at City Center actually.
Okay.
But yeah, those are really great. But just, and a lot of those like warmers are also like, you can freeze them and they'll be cooling. You can put them in the microwave and they'll warm up. But anything like that, like for your fingers or toes, are great because neuropathy it's real and it's gonna happen.
So then, what about like the days that you're walking into actually like chemo treatment? Like, what would you say? Like, hey, if your girlfriends were to get you like a set of jammies or like sweatshirt, like what are really weight of blankets, heat blankets. Yeah, kind of walk me through. What are some things that would be great for you to give a friend?
Like comfy sweats are great. Oh, you know what else was great for me? Because I went through my hair loss like the hair loss happened for me late summer, fall, and so once the weather cooled down, and I got sick of wearing wigs.
They're itchy.
Yes,
right?
they're itchy. Yeah. They're hot, and they get in the way, and they're really delicate. And so I ruined. Oh, quick tip. I knew that wigs were heat sensitive, but I did not realize how sensitive they were. So I was ruining wigs without realizing because I would be like, "Why is this so crunchy?" You're in the kitchen. If you just like stand in front of the stove for a second, that wig is done.
What?
If you open the oven to just take something out, that wig is done.
And they are not cheap. My daughter lost her hair, and we bought her it was like a $700 wig.
Yes.
And so they're not cheap. I mean and I know that's like a cheaper one too.
Yeah, and I was so frustrated. I was like, "What is happening? Yeah. I spent all this money, and these wigs are not lasting like a week." And I mean, maybe again.
Yeah. So what do? You just take off the wig now before you open up the oven?
Well, so. Over the winter, I just stopped wearing wigs because I got so sick of ruining them.
Like, I'm done.
And having to buy new ones.
Yeah.
Because again, you're a mom, you have to be, even those,
right.
Yeah, even those like Costco meals, sometimes you got to pop them in the oven.
Yeah.
And so I just started to wear like the knit, like the cute little knit caps in the wintertime with the pom-poms on top.
Okay.
For me, I really love them.
Yeah.
So cute, knit hats. In the summertime, maybe a cute baseball cap.
Okay.
Because I think for most women, they get sick of those wigs. I mean,
yeah.
It sounds cute, like, ooh, I get to, have whatever kind of hair I want, but really you get sick of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good one.
What about and I know I just feel like this is helpful because I think so many people are afraid to step in and ask, right? It's the same thing. When the divorce happened, people are like, I'm here for whatever you need, but it's the same space. One, it's hard to ask for help. And two, you're exactly right. You don't know what you need. It's new. So I feel like those who are on the other side sometimes can be like, hey, this is what this looks like. So, and this might be different for every person, going into chemo. And I don't know since COVID either. Are you allowed to have people there with you? Is it helpful to have friends? I think a lot of times what I've learned is when we walk through pain and we walk through hard times, I remember a girlfriend of mine who lost her husband and then her daughter. Mm-hmm. And I remember her saying, right, people just don't know what to do with it sometimes. And, I've told people, there's this quote that says, you can only go or take someone as far as what you've gone, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you've never encountered pain in your life, you've not had that friction, I think a lot of times our pain can rub against other people's pain, and they don't know what to do with it in that space. So those who aren't afraid, and that's why I'm asking, I'm not afraid to ask those questions, but what does that look like to have a friend show up either the day before chemo or meeting you at chemo or after, practical spaces?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question because I do think that there's a lot of people in our lives that want to be there for us, but they don't know how. Mm-hmm. And that could add to the uncomfortableness, awkwardness of the situation.
Yeah.
And so I think my experience is, or what I'm going to say is fairly representative of a lot of cancer patients, in that we enjoy the emotional support. We really appreciate the emotional support, and a lot of times we may not have the energy to fully engage. So it's not necessarily that we want to have a full-on conversation with someone. Or we want to be 100% focused on something, but just knowing that there's another person there, it really does something for you. And so if you want to be there for your friend, it's actually not as much, you don't have to do as much as you think you may need to do. So, if you want to drive them to treatment and you just want to coexist with them. So they're going to be tired. They might be dozing on and off, and you don't want them to feel the pressure of having to entertain you, of having to engage with you. So if you just let them be, but you're next to them reading a book, you're next to them knitting or you know something like that, they'll feel you there, and that is so impactful. And so I think, yeah, for a lot of cancer patients, they don't have the energy to host, but they actually really do love that, like loving just having another presence there.
So they are allowing people to like not be with you.
Yeah, I think for most cancer centers, you can have one companion with you.
And I don't even know what this looks like. So if you step into like chemo, like if I was to be like, hey, I'm gonna go with you, what's that time frame normally look like? I think a lot of people too, they're kind of afraid because like either they don't know how to step in space, but then they also don't know like what do they need, what's expected of them. So I kind of am hoping this gives people just that like they can breathe and so they kind of know, right?
Yes,
like what they're walking to.
You know, I just thought of a great analogy as you were kind of like saying that. For the friend, for the companion, think of yourself as an emotional support animal. So like the emotional support animal, it's sort of just like tagging along.
Yeah.
Just sit, lay down,
yeah,
and you're just there, right?
Yeah.
Like that's all you need to do. The emotional support
you might reach
animal.
out, pet him every once in a while, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you chit chat. You know, maybe your friend that's the patient may want to engage, and you're there to engage. But you know, nobody expects the emotional support animal to have to like put on a circus show.
Yeah.
So that's all you are. You're just emotional support animal. Maybe help them carry their bag. Maybe just grab them a cup of water if they need it.
Yeah.
But you know, on that day, they might have a doctor's appointment, and so if they're comfortable with you going into the room with them, then you're just there. You know, you might be a second set of ears. You know, ask them if they want you to take notes for them.
That's a really good thing.
Yeah, my aunt, she accompanies to those, and she's there taking diligent notes. And a lot of times we don't need to refer back to them, but
it's nice to have them.
Exactly.
So you're just saying like people sitting there like in chemo treatment with you. I mean, just to kind of like be like that presence and to be there is so helpful.
Yes, yeah. There's just a lot, I think, when it comes to having another person kind of walk next to you in parallel. It just I don't know what it is about it. But they sort of, I don't know if it's like their energy sort of like feeds into you, and they sort of like pull some of that weight off of you and they carry it for you. But just something about it just really, really eases your mental load. Yeah.
I mean, I love like Brene Brown talks a lot about this with like empathy. I don't know if you've ever seen, she's done like, you know, all these things around like empathy and what that looks like. And you know, I think a lot of times what people, especially like as women, sometimes we want to fix the person or we want to like fix the situation, right? Make it better. And you cannot make the cancer go away. You can't make that. But right, empathy is literally just sitting next to that person and being like, I'm sorry that this is happening and I'm here for you.
Yeah.
That's like all I think you said that. It's you said that earlier, and I was like, ooh, that is so spot on. You're like, it's not as much as people think it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Sometimes we, especially in like such a fast moving like society that we live in today, we really just want to like go in and fix it. As moms, we want to just fix it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't fix it, and it's just about like, I feel it, you know, you're the one going through it, but as much as I can, I'm feeling it, and I know that I see that you feel it. I see that you're going through this. Like, yeah.
I think that it reminds me of, I can't remember if it was Brene who says this, but you know, empathy is not only saying like exactly that. I see you in it. I see you feeling it, but then believing them, believing that story, right? Because that's the part is everybody's experience is different in it. And so sometimes, right, like you were saying this, like for maybe one person who's walking through cancer, you're like, they might have rashes the whole time, right? Versus for you, it could be something totally different. And so, you know, it's good having like, oh, here, these are some of the things that could happen. But knowing that your experience, right, your experience as a single mom walking through chemo is going to be really different than somebody who is, you know, their kids are out of their house and they're married walking through chemo, right? Our experiences are different. And I think that that's a lot of times when people, it was always interesting to me when people be like, oh, well, you know, you have something hard, but it's not as hard as your heart.
Yeah.
And that always got me because I'm like, no, it's still hard. Like whenever you're feeling those spaces. And I think that's what's, to me, really beautiful when people walk and encounter other people who have walked in painful spaces or those challenging moments, is because we've been able to feel things sometimes that remind us that we're human. And then I feel like gives me so much more empathy for others, whether I've walked in that situation or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all relative, right? You know, our pain is our pain, and we all, you know, we're all dealing with what we can handle, what we can deal with. And I think, you know, you mentioned space. I think that's what it is. It's sometimes having another person there, um, as a supporter of someone who is sick. So sorry.
You are fine. You're fine.
As a supporter of someone who is sick, you're sometimes they have large feelings that they don't know what to do with, and they may not feel completely safe or valid in feeling those feelings. And what you can really do for them as a friend, as a supporter, is to create space to allow them to have those feelings and to validate their feelings.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I know that I will feel angry, or I'll feel scared, or I'll just feel really sad. And then I think, well, you know, am I justified in feeling this way? I'll think, well, it could always be worse. You know, somebody could be going through whatever, and should I really be feeling this way? But, you know, as we talked about, what you feel in that moment is what you feel. And so, you know, as a friend, as a supporter, for someone to come and, you know, say like, it's okay to feel that way.
Yeah.
You know, I validate it, I see it. And I think that will do a lot for, you know, the emotional, I guess, piece of the patient.
Do you feel like walking in, you know, this kind of space and scenario, I just think it's really interesting. I mean, you went from, you know, I always like to tell people we all have these traumas in our life, right? Like big T traumas, little T traumas. And so, right, I mean, a divorce, like big T trauma, right? Cancer, that's a big T trauma. I tell people like little T traumas can be, you know, things like the friend at the playground made fun of you, or like, right, I walk through these with my kids, but I said because it's like the small things that start to create fragmentation in our hearts and fragmentation with other people. And so when you've watched this, like walking with your friends, do you feel like it's been really interesting to see how people have like shown up in that space? And have you been able to, do you feel like people have been really open to like hearing like, hey, this is how I can show up in this space? Or do you feel like you've watched kind of like the shift where some are like, ooh, I don't want to touch that, you know, versus others who are like, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, you know, luckily for me, I've just been overwhelmed with how much the people in my life have really stepped up to try to let me know with no uncertainty that they're there for me. You know, again, we've talked about they may not know exactly how to show it, but I think also us as cancer patients, we need to sort of see people for their hearts and their intentions. You know, sometimes we're in our feelings a little bit, and we're obviously in an emotionally sensitive, you know, time, but it's important that we take a step back and we recognize, oh, even if the offer or the wording or how it's communicated or what is communicated isn't exactly what I need in that moment, the heart, the warmth, you know, the extent, the intention is all there, and that is what I need.
Yeah.
So, you know, look for those bright spots, you know, to take into you.
I remember my friend told me like when her husband passed away, and she's like, you know, people would say things like, well, they're in a better place or they're whatever, and she's just like, this isn't helpful, you know. I mean, just wanted to kind of throw something at somebody. And I think like you're exactly right. I think a lot of times I remember it was actually when I was talking with one of my therapists, and they said, you know, how passionate are you about, actually for me, I remember having a conversation about racism. And I was like, yeah, I'm very much against it. And at the time, my roommate was actually Black. And he said, you know, had asked me a few questions around that, and then said, what's the last book you read about it? I was like, that's interesting. And so I think what happens is we, you know, like we all have, you're exactly right, these intentions and these hurts and these pieces of like, oh, you know, my friend has cancer and I want to step up and walk into that space, but how much research have you done? Like, this is what they're about to walk through, and how do I support them in it, or how are these spaces in it? So I think that's some of also my heart in this, is to try to maybe give some information to those who are going to want to walk inside of it with their friend. Because for me, I remember when I came home from that session, I asked my roommate, I said, can you give me 2 good books on race that I could read? Because I know I'm not okay with racism, but I can't tell you the last book that I've read about it because I don't know where to start with it. Can you give me that information? And so I think that's right. A lot of times people just need the information of, what do I say? So what are the things that are helpful, like in that, like if somebody, like, right, like saying to you when you've just found out that you have cancer, I think people don't even know what to say to you.
That's a tough one, because, you know, I'm still, you know, as the person on the receiving end of that, I'm still sort of figuring out, like, yeah, what is it that's good to hear? So, in terms of resources, there is a TEDx talk on YouTube. It's pretty short, but I think it's like, what do you say to someone who's dying of brain cancer, or what do you say to someone who has brain cancer, or something like that? And it's a guy who, I think he actually recovered from brain cancer. It's his tongue-in-cheek speech about sort of how different people approached him in different ways throughout his illness, and he said, just show up, just be there, because it is a lot for someone going through it to articulate what you should do, because they themselves don't even know what to do with themselves. But if, you know, like a quick Google search, you'll find a lot of content, actually, because I was actually, I did have, you know, friends who sort of rubbed me the wrong way, I guess we'll say, when I initially had my diagnosis. And I even myself was thinking, am I the one who is being, you know, a little difficult here, or what's the right way to look at this? But really, I think, once again, if you're approaching it with a lot of heart and stillness, so don't rush to, you know, rush in to make a grand gesture or to kind of save the day. If you just kind of approach it with some grace and some calmness, and kind of take your cues from that person, if that person has any grace within them at all, you know, I think it will be a fairly good interaction.
So I'd say those who are on the cancer side of it, would you probably say, hey, be willing to like receive help or ask for help?
Yeah.
And you said even in the ways that maybe you don't know, right? Like, what would you give that advice to us women who struggle to ask for it? And
Yes,
who,
yeah.
you know, yeah.
I mean, I'm definitely one of those, and I'm, you know, still trying to work that out, but definitely, yes. Be willing to take a moment and hear the other person. You know, I've had people tell me, you're gonna slow down, you're going to feel tired, I'm here to help you. And I was like, no, you know, it's not going to happen to me, I don't need your help, you know, and I actually pushed it away because I just couldn't accept that I needed that help. And it's scary, and you're trying to figure it all out, and it is really hard to find your equilibrium, but you know, take a moment and actually consider, I guess, what is on the offer. And then And as I'm saying this, I'm thinking on the other side, you know, I think your patient, your cancer patient, friend, family, you know, might lash out at you, you know, whether it's out of fear or misplaced anger or whatever, and just cut them some slack because it's not because of you.
Yeah. So for somebody, let's say like they're in the beginning and they, you know, maybe they're in that space. What are some things small? Like, is it maybe you just like send them a freezer meal, or you just drop one off and you're just like, hey, love you, note, kind of a thing. Like, what are some things that?
Well, you know, I've had a couple of friends who, throughout the entire experience, will send me texts, but they'll say no reply necessary. Do not feel like you need to reply. I just wanted you to know I was thinking of you, and it's not even just like thinking of you, which in and of itself would be lovely and great, but they'll also, you know, just write me a long text, almost like, you know, what a traditional letter would be, just with their thoughts or whatever, and they'll just say, you know, just wanted to share some thoughts with you. No need to reply, and that's amazing, because a lot of times I think, you know, again, you know, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to show up for other people, right? And so when people will text me and say, how are you, hey, how are you doing, how are you feeling, I'm just checking in on you, how are you feeling, then you're like, okay, I need to sit down, and, you know, brain fog is real, and exhaustion is real, and something like typing out a text, that actually requires more energy than, you know, somebody with energy would think. And so even having to respond to those well-meaning texts can feel a little bit exhausting. And so, you know, those like explicitly stated no need for reply messages were fantastic. And also it wasn't like, you know, thoughts are never like those positive thoughts are never intrusive, right? You don't have to worry, oh, if I send her a meal, does she already have something planned? Was she actually going to be home? You know, whatever. And not to say meals aren't great. Meals are great. My kids loved, you know, some of the meal train meals we got, and you know, and you know, people feel bad if it's not a home cooked meal. Don't feel bad. You know, the days where friends got me Chick-fil-A takeout,
your kids
were my kids' favorite. Yeah, exactly. And so once again, you don't have to. It does not have to be a whole song and dance. Sometimes those little gestures are, you know, more than enough.
So I will just ask you, because I don't know if has, how are you feeling today?
Oh, I'm feeling pretty well.
You had radiation yesterday, right?
Yes, I just started radiation last week, and so I'm kind of, I think you can tell, you know, through the course of our conversation, even, I'm getting there a little bit. My energy level is down for sure. Brain fog is something that I struggle with constantly. That's probably the most frustrating part of all of this, is not having your mind, again, as a busy mom, you know, worrying that you're forgetting, you know, a practice there, a game here.
As long as you don't forget a kid, you're normally good. And even if you do, sometimes they're grateful to you for that. So
hopefully, fingers crossed, you get them on a good day.
Right.
Yes, and radiation so far has been good, but that in and of itself has challenges with your skin, and, you know, and depending on what part of your body you have to have radiation, that can be tough. And so I'm doing my best to try to remember to do all the skincare things that the doctors and nurses have told me to do, and so fingers crossed that it won't be too bad.
Man. Well, I'm just proud of you for showing up. It's hard being like a single mom, but then single mom walking through chemo. So if nobody's told you today, like, I'm really proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's really nice to hear those sentiments. You need to hear it from somebody else here and there.
you struggle to, I think sometimes even like receive it, right, and acknowledge it. And yeah, I know that that's something I've tried really hard to work on, and I think encourage just women in general to like to do that space. So yeah, well, as soon as you get to be done with radiation, that's something I guess we can like I'll throw this in there and we're almost done, but we want you to be 6 months out. I always tell people like if they've not walked into it yet, and that's always why I wish I could get people before they start chemo, because once that drug hits their body, man, it's crazy how fast their skin shifts. I mean, you are more at risk of like infection, things like that, but it's more so, I tell people it's like a canvas. And so when that canvas changes for us as an artist, it's not that our hearts aren't in it and we don't want to do it. It's that your skin has shifted so radically that like the way the pigment will go in, the color could change. It's not going to go in as well. So I always tell people it's about 6 months after that, like I feel like your skin, kind of like you were saying, is like it's starting to turn back over and that kind of a thing. That then we can do like touch-ups, or we could even do that. I will say, I remember there was a client of ours who came, and it was so sweet. Her girlfriend actually got her a full face permanent makeup session before she started chemo.
Oh wow!
And I remember I came in on a Sunday to do it. I mean, and I was here I think almost 10 hours because it just took us. We wanted to knock it out. But same thing. So I know that she literally, it was like I think she had a group of 10 friends, and they all pitched in and did that for her.
That's actually amazing because, and that's a really good one that I did not think to mention. You as the patient, you're so overwhelmed when the diagnosis happens and all of the medical stuff starts. Having your loved ones do research for you in terms of like, oh, what are all the things, there's a lot out there that cancer patients even put out of like things I wish I would have known.
Yeah.
And just to have your loved ones do that research for you because you are not in that state of mind to do it.
Yeah.
And to help get you prepared. That's amazing.
Yeah.
What a great gift.
I know. It was so sweet. And they had this like thing, and then they did like a head shaving party after, and yeah, it was just really thoughtful and sweet of them. Back in the day before I was a pro makeup artist, I used to do actual makeup, and I remember even just doing regular makeup on a cancer patient was hard because the skin texture just wouldn't hold it. It was almost like it was like slip. It was like yeah. So like for like if they were doing it for like a wedding, right, and then you'd stand all day. Now makeup's radically changed since back in my being a makeup artist days, but I just remember like you kind of said, are you gonna have to wear concealer? Are you gonna have to wear all these things, right? And when you feel like junk, let's just be real. That's like the last thing on your mind is, oh, I'm gonna get up and put on makeup, even though you want to because you know you're gonna feel better with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like me last night. My daughters were like, "Mom, you're really dark." I was like, "Yeah, I was feeling a little pasty, so I put on a spray tan, kind of thing." But it's like I tell people, those are just like the things you don't want to do, but you'll feel better if you do it. So once again, that's why I love the permanent makeup avenue. Is they just don't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
It's not the best thing for you. We're not going to do it.
Yeah.
If I don't believe in the product, I will not sell it. And I just kind of am like, I think if more people moved into that mindset of like having those organic and just really wanting what's best for another person, I just feel like it would really change the way people showed up in the world. And in our industry even, there's a lot of like fear around like, oh, well, I couldn't share this or I couldn't do this. And it's kind of like what I said that earlier of, we can only do so many people here. So it's like even giving this education to other artists of like, okay, you can do a client right before they start chemo, but man, once that chemo starts, like hands are off. But for us at least, I've even told people, I mean, I'm willing to come in where I know we've had clients where they get diagnosed on a Friday and they're starting chemo on Monday, and it's like, hey, like let's get you in really fast where we might be booked for whatever. That's where we try to have some flexibility with our schedules to be able to bring in people like that. Because
how do they know to like, how do they think of it?
So it's interesting. A lot of times when we've had clients who called and they said, hey, so I don't know if it's because they've heard me maybe say it before on a reel or something, but they'll be like, hey, I just got diagnosed with cancer, and so I don't know what made them think like I'm going to lose my eyebrows. But then I've had people, and I think that's why we're trying to educate more. Because I will say, I probably get way more calls where people are like, hey, I just lost my eyebrows. Can you fix them?
That's what I would think, is that people
Yeah.
would lose it, and then they would realize, then they would scramble to figure out what they need to do. But
it's very few where people think of it prior, which is why we're trying to kind of get this message more and more out there of, you know, and that's hard because, you know, I think I shared that with you earlier of, I had that client who she lost her hair, she lost her brows, but she never lost her eyelashes. And so, you know, we were still able to do extensions on her all the way through her treatment until she actually passed away. But you just don't know. You don't know what you're going to lose. And I've heard, you know, even some of, I've had some friends before who walked through it and they're like, you don't think about small things, like you realize your nose hair. So your nose is going to be like more running than, you know, than typical, or things like that. And I tell people, it's just like, you just don't know what that's going to look like. But I tell people, the problem is once you're in it, then I can't touch you. So that's always the hard part. And that's heartbreaking for me when people call and they're like, hey, I just lost my eyebrows, what can you do? And I'm like, even like tinting or henna, or which, right, you know, henna is a chemical, it's a plant, so you can always have like those skin interactions with that. It's really just like, it's prior to. So yeah. Have there been conversations with you guys, because chemo is normally like in a room, right, like with other women who are or men, right?
But you don't really like
Converse.
Interact with the other people, like because you're in these like pods or bays or whatever, and they're very separated, and sometimes you get a private room, and like most people are zonked out, and they're usually zonked out because there's like Benadryl is one of the pre-meds they give you, and so you just
Benadryl knocks me in my butt, so I could be one of those people. But
I think like would you like the contact information for like the program coordinator?
I would love that. Because that's who would get the information, right? Because when you guys get diagnosed, it's the doctors are the ones who tell you.
Really? So I think you might have to work backwards a little bit, but so this is what happens on the patient side. You get diagnosed, and like on sort of like your first day, when they kind of tell you this is what's about to happen, you meet with your, like in a very quick succession, within a matter of days, or within like, you know, 1 to 3 days, you meet with your surgeon, your oncologist, you meet with maybe like a nurse coordinator, and you meet with a social worker. The social worker is the one who will tell you all your resources. And so then she, with me, she gave me like a binder that had like Pink Ribbon Connection and cancer community support. Like if you're, so like once it's a more like, let's just say permanent makeup is a more like standard thing, the nurses will just like recommend it to the patients. So like for me with radiation, there was a nurse who sat me down and went through the standard instruction for how to take care of my skin. But as she's talking, she's also saying, you could also do this. Other people have told me this. You might want to do that. And so as it becomes, I think, more of like if they know that it's okay, they're not going to get in trouble for saying it, then they'll just recommend it to people. And that's really the best opportunity to get the patient. Because like usually by the time they get to the pink ribbon or whatever, they've already started treatment. Because you are not like sort of prioritizing that until you get a chance to do it. Later.
In the beginning you're just in survival mode. You kind of hit this. Because
you usually start treatment like the following week, like or you know, very shortly after. But like I think in terms of like how to sort of like get that cred or whatever with the social worker or the nursing staff is to start working with the cancer nonprofits. And then, you know, and once they sort of establish a relationship there, then the social worker will start recommending it, and then the nurses will feel comfortable recommending it. I think that's how the best way goes in it.
Because we really need to have people who are on that, like you said, it's about a week. and that's all. That's such that small window that we get to be able to work on you guys, and then once you guys hit it, our hands are off until you're done. 6 months out.
Yeah.
So
it's really like the social worker and the nursing staff is going to be the best source of information for the patient. Yeah.
So if you guys are in a different state, you guys are watching this, and you guys are hearing kind of what she walked through, ways to connect into like your hospitals and things like that is going to be like, it sounds like that, like working that way backwards. And so hopefully just establishing those connections with like local nonprofits and things like that's going to be your best way to help others who are going to walk into this treatment.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me and taking the time. I know it's really precious as a single mom and walking through all these things. So hopefully this gets to be really helpful to others who are ready to walk in it. And we'll like have all the links below of recommendations of skincare and lotions and all the fun things that can be really helpful for a girlfriend or loved one who's going to walk in this.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing this information.
Yeah, thanks.